Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining this webinar with us today. My name is Thiago. I am a customer success manager here at TagoIO. Today, we're going to be talking about automating your IoT application using the TagoIO SDK. So buckle up for some best practices, resourceful information, and a live demo on the end to refer you to where find the documentation and resources you need to improve your application in various aspects. So today I have with me Vitor Lima, which is an application software developer here at TagoIO, much experience in developing IoT applications, which can be very resourceful to us in order to understand what are the principal best practices, where to find the documentation, how to apply these techniques onto our day-to-day. I will post on the sticky message our LinkedIn profile. Don't forget to follow and stay tuned with the new features and everything that's coming along in events and other webinars that will be available on the upcoming days. Today we are present in California in IoT Tech in Santa Clara. So if you are nearby, feel free to visit our booth there. So with no further ado, let's go to our agenda. We're going to be talking firstly about the SDK concepts, why is important, some of the resources, and then Vitor is going to show us live how to apply that. At the end of the session, there's going to be a Q&A. So if you have any questions in the meantime, while Vitor is presenting it, feel free to post on our Q&A chat. So with no further ado, Vitor, you can start on the good stuff.
Hey everyone, Vitor here. So I want to introduce you to our software development kit. And first, what is an SDK? So this is a kit for Python and JavaScript that we provide for you. And it basically simplifies all the interaction you can have with our API using choose languages. And is fully designed for ease of use, so it should be very quickly to set up, start using, have a lot of help and documentation on different usages that you can have within our SDK. Some key features of the SDK is the capability of managing your devices, which means editing, updating, managing your data, your users, and your files. But basically, everything that you could do using our API is available through our SDK as well. So why is it important to know the SDKs? So it abstracts a lot our API calls. Should be very easy for you to set up. It speeds up your development time. Our team is responsible for maintaining and updating the SDK. So every new endpoint functionality should be available in no time for our SDK. We do have an extensive documentation. You should be able to see a lot of tutorials in our community. And also, the SDK is available inside the analysis feature of Tago. So understanding the SDK is very important if you are hoping to use analysis for some BI activities and generically automatizing your application, like automatically creating devices, importing data and information from other services. So very helpful. So some of the resources that we have is our documentations on the SDK through our help.tago.io. You should be able to see both documentation, JavaScript, and Python through the .sdk.tago.io, GS or PY. And with no delay, I want to give a live demo how you install, how do you use, and what is important to know when you are using the SDK or even our API, because it applies for both. So let me share my screen here. So one of the important aspect of the SDK is that it uses, underline the SDK, it uses our API. So one of the things you must be aware of is the hard limits of your account. So here I did access my hard limits for this profile. And under the requests, you can see how much requests by minute you can do for each different type of service or endpoint that we have through the SDK. So for example, if you are creating devices, you should check what is your RPM for the create endpoint. So in this case, it means I can create 5,000 devices each minute in this profile. Same thing goes for data. So all these are endpoints that are available and you may or may not use through the SDK or the API. So this is the most important aspects, I think, for you. And in order to use the SDK, you will need an analysis token. So let me generate one so we can move to installing the SDK. For this webinar, I'll be showing the SDK for TypeScript, but keep in mind, it should be the same for the Python version of the SDK. So let me create a analysis here. So just give a name, choose your runtime. It don't actually matter if you're just using the SDK. But of course, this is more if you are running your code inside Tago or not. So let me create my analysis. And what I want from here is the external option. So I can have my token here. So let's save. And now I have a token that I can use externally for my SDK. Another important topic is that since I'm using a token from an analysis, I am required to have some permission set for this analysis. So for example, if I would like to access my devices, getting my device list or editing a device, I need to set an access policy for this analysis to have access to my devices. The way I do this is I go to the access, add the policy, I give it a name. I can choose my analysis from here. So let's pick by ID, so it's very easy to do, and set my permissions here. So in this webinar, I want to show you how to access, get data from your devices, and how to create devices. So I'll give these permissions for my analysis, but I can just enable everything if I don't want to micromanage the permissions. And here I would choose which devices this analysis would have access. So just to simplify, I'll pick here any, so this analysis will have access to all the devices from my profile. Let's pick run user here as well. I want to give an example on how to access your users, how to create notifications for a user. So let's give access to every single user. Another thing that I think I can show you Oh, let's be just these two ones. Great, apply my changes, and now my analysis here should have access to both the device and run users functionalities of the SDK and the API. So I'm now going to move here to my terminal, and I'm already in my webinar folder here. If you are using Node and are familiar with Node, this should be very common for you at this point. But I want to create a package for my Node.js. So just press enter here. And then I'm going to install the TagoIO SDK for my Node projects. And now I should have everything I need to start programming. So let me create a folder here. Check my package, see that I have the dependency for the SDK. And I can start write scripts here that access Tago and perform actions based on my code here. So let's call this start.js. And just for example here, let's pick my list of devices so I can get my resources. I believe it's a new here, and pass my token. Is this one? Let me check again. Grab my token and paste it here. Yes. So this is my token, and now I should be capable of listing my device. So I want to show this very quickly so you can see how easy it is to set up and use. The SDK. And a console log so I can see all my devices. So what I did so far is that I did import my resources class from the SDK. I did set up my token, my analysis token with the resources so I can have all permissions that my analysis have, and I am now getting the list of devices from the SDK. Just it should be giving some informations here, not sure why, but let's see if this code runs. Okay, let me pick a different one here, just a minute. I'm just creating a new file in other project here, so I don't need to set up all this. And copy this code, paste it here, and move it to here. I'm having a problem setting up the resources here, not sure why. Yeah, it did work now. Sources, token. Okay, so this is devices. Now it's running. So I just did importing correctly here. Sorry about that. So now picking my list of devices. So this is all devices in my account. So let's say I want to filter. And now since I did import correctly, you can see you have inside Visual Studio Code here at least it get all the documentation we have inside and also the auto-completing, right? So this is, I think, very important for you to see from inside your IDE everything that you can do. Okay, so you have your Azure device lists, and let's say you want to filter by some tags. You could do something like this. And filter your devices by a given tag. So let's see if that returns something. Yes, so I got all my devices with the tag sensor. And just to show you up here, I have a few devices set up in my account. And I have 2 devices here set up with sensor. So filtering by tags is something that is very useful when you are using analysis, the SDK or the API, so you can pick the correct devices for different purpose that you have. And from here, I can do basically any kind sort of actions. Which is very common to do is for you to loop on each device. So here goes just a list, a quick example. So you can loop each device and, for example, get data from each device. Devices, get device data. So I pass my device ID and I can filter here. So for example, I have a variable on my devices called active energy, and I can set here to get only the active energy variable for this device. And let's say I only want the last data that I receive, so I can loop through each device and get this data. Here I'm just destructuring the data because the get device data always return an array of data. So I'm just picking the first information. And just to exemplify, let me show you how these show up for you. I'm going to run here again, and you can see that for one of the devices, I don't have any data, and the other device, I did receive an array containing the data information for that specific device. So if I destructure here, I would get the first eating of the array and don't get that empty array anymore. And from here, I can do all sorts of action. I can send this to a different service, run any local code that I want on top of this data. I can also edit this device. So doing loops is very common. And also keep in mind that you have an RPM, right? So if you are scaling or plan to scale, it's good to think ahead of time so you don't use all your RPM for doing this kind of scripts. So for example, here I can check if I did receive any data, perform some action here. using my autocomplete from Copilots, very useful. And I'm just doing some kind of operation here so you can see what you can do with the SDK. So up to here, I do expect this to be very simple, right? And for turning this into an analysis, very simple as well. I can show you by the end here. But it's not just devices, right? We can also access our users, which is a very common use case as well. So let me pick my list of users, and user is actually part of your Tago run, right? Because the only use for users that you have is to access the run environment. And if you don't know what is run, is a feature inside TagoIO where you can deploy your application to end users, and end users would have access to your dashboards or the dashboards that you give them permission to access. And you get this endpoint that you can customize with your own domain, which users will be using to access the application. So let me get back here, and I can get my, let me put this outside so I don't need to repeat. So as part of the run, and you do have access to accounts, action, analysis, dashboards, your dictionaries, files. So a lot of things that you can use from here. So under the run, you have all your user management methods that you can use to call our API. So in this case, I want the user list or list users, yeah. And I can pass a carry here, apply some filters, but let's say I just want 2 users, or the last 2 users that had been registered to my account. And by the way, you do have the order by if you want to change the order. Let's say you want to pick the last one or the first one. And here I can just console log my list of users. So if I run, I get my 2 users here. And you can see I only receiving the ID and the name. So in most of the API calls and the SDK calls, we only return the most necessary information. And if you want additional information like email, tags, you would need to specify here. So I have the fields, and I can say what I want from here. So I want the ID, the name, the email, and let's say the tags. So if I run again, I should now have all the information for me to use. And one cool thing that you have for users is that you can send them notifications, right? So they can read when they log in, or if they are using the application right now, they would receive a notification. So let's try to use this. Great notification. So we need to provide the user ID and the data. And here, if you are using VS Code, you should have the autocomplete, right? You can also enter the methods and see what is expected for this interface. So for notification create, we need title, message, read icon. But let's say you don't have an EDA like this one, or you are just coding inside Tago itself for the analysis. You do have the documentation. TagoIO SDK. Yeah. So you can go here to get the documentation. All the examples would be here. This is more targeted to the analysis. So in some cases, you should be seeing some analysis code, but this is fully just the SDK in this case. So let's say I want to see what I should send for creating notifications. I can use the search function here, right? Or I can just navigate to run. I have all the methods listed here. So notification creates. So it expects user ID and a data, and data should be a notification create interface, which is basically a JSON containing all these informations, with the optional ones having this question mark. So you can do all the get all the information you need from the documentation or from inside your IDE. So here, you just fill up the required fields. Let's see if there is any others. So everything here is optional. I could set up an icon for this notification, set up custom buttons for this notification. And when I do this, let's get the result here. Create that and do a console log. So when I run this, I get all my users and I get the ID of those notifications. So these IDs, for example, would allow me to delete or edit these notifications from my users. So for example, and now I'll do a request that this token here do not have access, just to show you what happened when you try to use a method that you don't have a permission to use or you have not set up the permission. So let's say I want to delete one of the notifications. Notification delete. And it does expect me to just provide the notification ID. So let's paste it here. And when I run this, I get an authorization denied. So you don't have that clear information that you need to set up the permission, but you get this authorization denied. So authorization denied could be related to a wrong token, so your token do not exist, etc. But if that's not the case, check your permission, because probably you have not set up the permission to use that endpoint. So this was just an example for you to see what happens and know how to act when you see the kind of error showing up in your console. So another thing that is very common to do is to create devices, right? So for example, let's say you have a CSV file in your machine, or you want to access another API, very common if you are using a lot of network servers, you can do some automations to access the LNES API, fetch our devices from there, and just create in Tago, so you don't need to do all the create device by device manually. So I think very cool to show you how that works. So let's set up a device create method here. Yeah, so we can create the device, and it do expect the device objects, and I can use the autocomplete here to see everything that I can pass or check the documentation. So let's set this a device, the name of the device. So let's say test device. I could set the description, but it's optional. So important parameters here are the network. So network must be an ID of the network, and our connector. So both these terminologies is found inside TagoIO. So if you have your own connector and network, you can use your own. But you can use the public one as well. And you can fetch here by manually navigating to the network and device that you want. So let's say I want to create a database. So I go to the network database, I pick the connector, and I should see in the URL here on the top both the IDs that I need. So first one will be the network. And you can see from here as well, right? Network equal, you have the ID of the network here. But let's pick here the network from my function and pick the connector. Okay, so I have now both. And last thing, when you create a device, you have the storage type. So this is required. And if you are very familiar to this, you can choose immutable or mutable, the chunk period, and the chunk rotation if you are choosing immutable. If it's mutable, you use the type. So let's do the most complex one, immutable. And immutable require us to set up the chunk period, which already fill up here the options for me. So let's say I want a month, and the chunk rotation, which can be 12 months, for example, for a year. So I think I have everything I need. I can do a console log to see what I receive when I create a new device and run this code. Yeah, so my device had been created, and I do receive the device ID and the token. So for example, if you want to store this token locally to provision with your devices, you can do that. If you are in a different platform running this code, you can get the token and store in the platform. You have the ID as well if you want to track the ID, or even if you want to do some modifications here. So for example, you want to have the device created first and want to use this device for some other automations, like creating a action or something like that. You can pick from here and continue your code. So I think all this is very useful. And let's say, so just let's see on my account here if my device had been created. So test device, 12 month of data rotation, connector, database, network storage. So exactly what we would expect. So some other things we can do here as well is set up tags. So everyone that has been using TagoIO manually for some time should already know how trouble is to set up tags manually every time you create a device. So very good if you can do the automation for your system, automatically set up multiple tags based on what you want. Another thing you can do from here is the configuration parameters. Let's see, it receives an array with key value, and I believe the send parameter as well. So you can also set up configuration parameters automatically when creating new devices. And from here, if you want to turn this into an analysis, the SDK is already in place for you to move forward, right? All you need here is to import the analysis. class from the SDK and transform this in a function so we can so our analysis can call this function. So let's say start analysis. Analysis do receive a context and a scope if you want to use. Let's turn this into an async function so we can use the await, which we have been using so far. Yeah, so now we have basically an analysis here, new analysis. We need to pass our function. And if you will want to run the analysis in external mode, I would need to pass the token, right? But if not, I can just copy this code. I don't even need to provide the resource. I could call directly here, I believe. Let me check resources. Yeah. So for analysis, you don't even need to provide or instance the class. You can use directly here. Yeah, we can use directly here from the import. So we could copy this, go to the analysis, webinar SDK, move to TagoIO, and paste our code here. So if I save and run, let's hope that this is going to run. Promise pending. Yeah, I did forgot the await here. Let's call this device 2. Save and run. Yeah, so it did run flawlessly. I did get my device ID and my token. And if I go here to test device, I will see my newly created device with all my tags that I set up and the configuration parameter. I did set up the configuration parameter, right? It did not set up my parameter, but another way we can do this is using the resources, devices, param set, and I can pass my results.id, device ID, which is the new device ID. Wait, and now I can pass my parameters here. So let's test this code inside Tago, just to ensure you have all the information you need, right? Or maybe I have not set up the permission, but let's see. Yeah, now I have my configuration parameter and my tag for this device. So just to wrap up this, I also want to show how the Tago Builder. So the Tago Builder is another tool that you have specifically for Node.js, JavaScript, which allows you to use any package from the NPM that you have on the web. So let's say, for example, I want to use the LoRa packet, for example. So I have this packet that is using, that you can use to decode a LoRaWAN packets from that had not been decoded by the LNS, by your tools, or by the needs. So for example, this could not be available inside TagoIO. So if I try to import this from inside my analysis, it would tell me that this package do not exist, right? So you cannot install as well, but what you can do is to develop your analysis in external here, as I have been doing so far, and use the Tago Builder to create a webpack and upload the webpack here. So let me show you how you can do that. So let's start by first installing the Lora packets. Go back to my terminal here, npm install and then save Lora packets. Yeah. So install here on my package. I can import a lot of packets. And I can start to use. Let's just see how this works, right? So it's basically kind of a CLI here. So from wire. So let's just pick something very random here. I just want to show you how you can use different packets. So this is now in my code, and let's say this code is running here because I have the package, but TagoIO do not have this package. So what should I do to get this work with Tagos? Another thing we can install here is the TagoIO builder. And it's taking a while to install. And what this allow me to do is to create my my Webpack version of this analysis containing this package that I am using, this package that I'm using for this specific analysis. So let's call the TagoIO builder for my analysis there. So I use npx because I did install for this repository only, but if you install globally, you will not need the npx. I just call the Tago builder and the path for my file. So I start to packing up all the analysis with the package, and now I have this new file here. I do believe the Lora packet actually is inside the Tago builder, otherwise we would have more code here for the Lora packets. And yeah, you don't need to have concerns about if a package is included or not. The Tago builder automatically will ignore the code if the package is already inside the platform. So if you are using Axios or Day.js or Luxon that handles date and time, this will not be packed because TagoIO already supports, and the Tago builder automatically identifies that and knows that the platform already have the support for the packet. So here I have the Webpack version. I can just copy here, come back to my analysis. I could upload here, load from my machine, or I can just copy and paste the Webpack version, save, and you will see, and you have your package working within Tago, running inside Tago itself. So I think that just open up a lot of flexibility, right? So let's say you want to use Google SDK, you want to access your Google Drive, your Google folder, get CSV from your Google storage. You can do that, or your Microsoft service, SharePoint. If your service has an SDK or an API, you can just import here and start using. So I hope that gives you some idea on how that you can do using the SDKs. You got some idea about the analysis as well. And I hope you find this useful. So Thiago, do we have any question?
Hi, Vitor. First of all, awesome presentation and great examples. We do have some questions here. The first one is from Olivia Esso. I have a raw variable that I like to transform through a dynamic formula that will depend on another variable that will be filled in by my users, and this calculation will be displayed through the widgets without storing this value. Can I use the SDK to perform these operations?
So let's see if I did understand correct. Have a dynamic formula
That will depend on another variable. This should be filled in by the end user.
So let me pick something here just to try to understand. Real quickly, a formula, you mean you have been using the dynamic formula? Oh, from variable, this one, right? So you pick your device, you call this a formula. So you getting this interdependence where your information here gets changed by the formula. Let me think. Yeah, you can do that. I don't see any problem. I'm trying to imagine some use case for this. So I imagining you'll be, for example, creating a device and you automatically want to create the formula as well. So you can do this, right? So the SDK, I do allow you to manage the data. So I did that example. Let me use this one. I made that example where you would get the data, but of course you can also send device data, right? Would be something like that. So let's say I'm creating my device and I also want to store a formula here. I don't see why you won't be able to do that, right? It would be something like that. For example, if you want to multiply the value by 25, so you can store this immediately after creating a device. But I would need some use cases if you want to formulate this more and be more helpful. But I think this can be achieved for sure.
Cool, thanks, Victor. And another question as well is, do we have to always run analysis externally? I think the answer is no, but it will be less limited if we run externally, right?
So in order to use, as I did in the first example, where we have the resource, right? Because I will not be using analysis at all, for example. So yeah, you need to have an analysis set to external so the token is available for you to use. And this is also important for security as well, right? So let's say you have some service you did upload or you have a developer working for you and you want to remove the access. You could do just delete the analysis if you want to completely remove it or change the token or change the permissions you have given for that specific analysis so the token will not have access to your devices anymore or would not have access to specific devices. So in order for this to work, yes, you are required to have your analysis, and the analysis must be running external for this token to work. Because at the moment I change this analysis to run internally, my token gets completely deleted and this token do not work anymore.
Got it. Thank you, Victor. Another question I have from Julie Hermes is, can you tell me more about the database connector? I think will be that storage connector that you shared before.
Oh, sure. So I think the most important is to understand networks and connectors, right? Because the database connector is only here, so you have this you can self-learn, right? You will see storage database, and you will automatically use that one because you would know you can use device for database. So it's kind of helpful learning method that we have used for our customers to understand they can use devices as a database. Devices not just for hardware. But what we are actually doing here is just having a network with no decoder and a connector that does not have any decoder. So this is not much different from me going here in integrations and create a network. And I can just create here. I don't need to fill anything. And creating a connector for the network. So this is basically the same thing. There's no change from using database connector and using this connector and network that I just created, right? So now I have my network here. I have my connector that I just created, and I can use this and send data. So the thing is that both the network and connector that I just created do not have any decoder. So it will not try to mess with the data that I'm sending. Because if you have a decoder, especially some decoders, right? Not all of them, but some decoders do try to decode whatever you are sending. We have a lot of tools in each decoder to try to not stop you from sending your custom data or doing whatever you want to send to your device. But there are some specific cases that some decoders do try to understand what you're sending, automatically parse it, or the network do. And you don't want that, right? Because you just want a database where you send your data and you get stored. So I think understanding the network and the connector is important because the database connector itself don't do nothing. You just allow you to identify that you have a device that is a database here. So I think this is as far as it goes.
Got it. Thank you, Vitor. Juliermes, I hope that helped you with your question. Thank you for pushing your question. Vitor, I have another one good for you. It would be great to know how to use the resource class externally in Python. I try using it, but it shows authorization denied. And for device class, it worked fine.
I don't have Python installed here to show you exactly how this works. But it should be the same as I have showed in the past here, right? When you get authorization denied, it means where it is. I don't remember when I tried this. But authorization denied means your token is invalid, but if it's working for a device, it means the token is valid, right? But it also means that you have not set up the permission for your analysis to use that operator. So under the access here, I have said webinar. So I did set up that this analysis would have access to my devices, my brain users, and here are the operations that this analysis can perform on that devices and on those users. So if I am trying to delete a user, I would get authorization denied because I have not given the permission here. So in order to give the permission to delete a user, I need to go here, update, and save this analysis so it can perform that kind of operation. So if you are seeing authorization denied and some things are working, it means probably that you have not set up the permission correctly.
Got it. Thank you, Vitor. And last one, how can we use third-party library for Python?
So third-party libraries for Python is not available. It only works, the Tago Builder only works for the Node.js version because it's very easy for us to set up the Webpack and upload. That can come in the future for Python, but it's not available yet.
Got it. All right. I hope that, oops, we got one more. How to use the blueprint device and file path when uploading a file. Is that possible with the SDK, Victor?
And I don't know what blueprint device in file path means. If we're talking about the widgets, so let me pick a farm widget here. So let's say I have a file upload. You have the patch to save files, but this is a path inside your file storage, right? It's not related to your blueprint device at all. So I don't quite understand the question.
Got it. All right. Ramya, maybe we can talk separately and understand how the case is going and provide some feedback there. Nevertheless, I hope that this webinar was helpful for everyone. Would like to thank everyone that joined. Also reinforce, if you have not followed us on LinkedIn, I have posted the link up top on the chat. And thank you, Victor, very much for the great presentation, sharing the resources and example. This can definitely be helpful when building and structuring an application. And look forward to seeing everyone on the next webinar. Thanks all.
Thank you all.